Lubrication and flow. Okay.
I think let's give each other a little bit more time. But can you hear me now? So I think we should give people a little bit more time. But what I beg of people right now is to come as far down the front as you feel comfortable, because I want to talk for about 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes on the ideas that I'm going to discuss, and then open it up to a discussion. And if we're down the front, maybe we can participate more effectively. Nobody moves. Yeah, that's right. Come on, Dale. No, seriously, come on, Dale. Right, you sit here. Okay. I'm going to wait until 5 past, half past, and then I'll start. There's a free iPhone 6s here. Anybody want to speak about? Okay, so I'm a long-time Smalltalk virtual machine architect and Smalltalk systems programmer. And my own 30th anniversary is that in 1986 I went to London University and started my first professional job in which I was paid to work on Smalltalk virtual machines. And since 2007 I've been working with the Squeak virtual machine, and since 2008 I've been working on COG, which is a high performance version of the Squeak virtual machine. I want to talk today about the state of the open source Smalltalk community, and then go on to discuss financial ideas or economic ideas for how the community can continue to grow. And these are ideas that I don't really know. This is the first time I've spoken at a Smalltalk conference on other than my own technology. So I'm right now talking about ideas that I have not a strong grip on, and I'm very interested in hearing the community talk to itself about these ideas. I'm more interested in starting a conversation than anything else today. My affiliation looks complicated. Since 2012 or thereabouts, I've had a full-time position at Cadence, and we use Newspeak, Gilad Bracha's Newspeak, on top of Squeak. And on top of that, we have a JavaScript-like language, and we have a system which is to do with integrating the design documents that define cell phones. So when you get a cell phone, the designer's job is to do things like grab a processor and a camera and a keyboard thing or whatever, and combine these as fast as they can. And we have a domain modeling system written in Newspeak, scripted in this JavaScript language, that's used to accelerate the design process for new phones. So Cadence are my full-time position, and they've paid for me to make the virtual machine faster. But recently, with reorganizations, and because I'm the least customer-facing engineer, I was put on half-time. And recently also, I started working with Clément Berra, who's a very, very bright PhD student in INRIA, working on an adaptive optimizer, which is the next step in the evolution of our performance. And Clément is on target for releasing the first version of this optimizer, which should increase performance by about a factor of 2 early next year. And Clément had expressed to me the desire to continue working with me on Smalltalk VMs. He found it enjoyable and challenging, and we both like working together. I find it enjoying and challenging. It's something that I want to continue to do. So my self-interest and Clement's self-interest is to find an economic context such that I can continue being a Smalltalk virtual machine engineer until I get run over by a bus or have a heart attack or something like that. So it's what I enjoy doing. So the problem for Clement, as one of the members of the FARO community who works for the state-sponsored INRIA research lab, is that these PhD students end up doing really good work like Petit Parser or Clement's work on the optimizer, and when they get to the end of the PhD, there's no employment opportunities. They have to leave the community and typically go to Google. So that's one systemic problem that we want to solve. The other problem that I had to solve was how to make up half of my income, given that I was on half time with Cadence. So I went to Tudor Gilbert, somebody in the FARO community that impresses me, whose work is of a high quality, and suggested that he and I go into business together. And so last year we got a contract with Lam Research, and Lam Research are very interesting users of Smalltalk for machine control. They build silicon wafer fabrication machines, large machines, kind of this kind of size, full of noxious chemicals that process silicon wafers, and all of the scheduling of these machines is done with Smalltalk. Lower levels of the system is done with C running on embedded processors to do real-time stuff, but all of the intelligence is in Smalltalk, and they build all of the robotics, and they do all of the surface physics. So they do the whole stack. The only thing that they don't do in the chip manufacture process is the original lithography. There's another company that does the photolithography, but Lam does all of the other machines. And if you look at a cell phone processor, it will go through 200 steps. It will go through 200 different machines. And these machines, because these wafers are so valuable, $1 million plus for each processed wafer, that they tolerate 4 hours of downtime a year in these machines. So they have quite an exciting use of Smalltalk. And I'll come back to that in a bit. So here's a sort of picture of the open source Smalltalk communities, and I'm proud that Chris now is running just as FARO and Squeak are on COG Spur, and Spur is an evolution in the object model in the virtual machine that made it possible to generate more efficient code and a more efficient VM. So FARO 5 is about 60% faster than FARO 4. So if we have a look at the commercial activity, or at least the activities around these communities, we can see academic activities, which is everything from teaching to the eToys activity with kids, and then see a really interesting set of startups, or at least companies that have been founded by Smalltalk users in many, many different domains. So Gerard Richarte has his very interesting company which is using COG in part to do satellites, and then you have people like Marcus Denker and his brother have a company which is doing the management for the bicycle rental for German state railways. A number of people in the FARO community are doing web startups in fields like tourism, etc. And then, of course, for me, I look at the existing Smalltalk customers, because I had a long time when I was working for Syncom, and I'm well aware that there are many interesting enterprise applications out there, and I'd love for some of them to come to the open source community. And indeed, one of the things that happened was that Lam approached us to have Doro and I investigate two things. One is the possibility of running Smalltalk on those smaller processors at a lower level in the system, and in reducing their costs for deploying, because they have quite expensive x86 based machines, whereas there is no particular performance constraint on their scheduling algorithms. It's all about the intelligence of the algorithm. It's not the speed. And if they can deploy on smaller machines, they can get some savings. And they can also prod their commercial suppliers to be as responsive as they need to be. So Doro and I were given a contract, and we did some work. And one of the things that Doro did for the team at LAM was introduce ideas from the Glamorous Toolkit and software visualization to allow them to raise the way in which they look at code. So instead of reading code in the browser, having much more metrics and interesting observations. For example, being able to observe, control panels like being able to see the number of commits and the quality of the commits and which package has the most commits, things like that. From that money, I wanted certain things done. There was a time last year when we were moving to the more up-to-date version of the Mac OS GUI and I was getting the 64-bit version of COG working when I needed the 64-bit GUI work done, and I paid John McIntosh to do that work. And then I'm very impressed by Bert's work with Squeak.js, but I want a fast browser, a fast VM in the browser. I want COG to work, so I paid Craig Latter to do the Snow Globe work, where he took the part of Squeak.js which connects the Smalltalk VM to the browser and interposed that between the COG VM and the browser, so now you can run your Smalltalk applications in the browser at full speed. So that was an example of trickle-down economics, where I, in an autocratic way, decided what would be done. So that's bad from many perspectives. It's not the community deciding what it's done. It's a very small and partial and unreliable flow of funds down. And, as we live in this neoliberal world, we can see that trickle-down economics doesn't work. So while I was pleased to get the work done, and I'm sure that Craig and John appreciated the money, it's not a satisfactory solution for funding at all. So how might the community be successful in those kind of terms? So what is a definition of success? I was reading an interesting article about Steve Jobs. Somebody had interviewed Steve Jobs and had come to the conclusion that the reason why Steve Jobs was successful is because he had maniacal focus and insatiable curiosity. And I have maniacal focus. I don't have insatiable curiosity. I know there are lots of people in this community who have just the same focus and just the same, much more curiosity than I, and we're not necessarily that successful. Well, this interviewer went on to then talk to a network scientist and found out that actually there's a really interesting predictor of success, and that is the openness or the closedness of your networks that you participate in. And so if you're somebody like Ralph, who's been in the object-oriented community for a long time, has a very, very open network, has talked to lots and lots of people, has had lots of experience in industry and in academia, in his students has had really intelligent people coming in and has benefited and has given of his expertise, and that's an example of the way in which an open network yields really interesting activity. And I think it's one of the fundamental reasons why we in the open source community, as opposed to the commercial side of the Smalltalk community, are in a position where we can thrive. It's very challenging. You're butting up against opposing ideas, people with different thoughts to yourself, but at the same time, those ideas are enriching, and they get you to think in new ways, and they get you to be more creative. And so if we can leverage this openness of our network, that's great, but we have some challenges. Well, okay, even if we have this open network, things are still not great and still not growing. I've expressed my dissatisfaction with the trickle-down model, and let me try and think of what the other problems that we're having. So the Faro community has set up some institutions to try and get monetary flow into the Faro community. So there's the Faro Consortium And there's another idea, Faro Pro. So the idea of the Faro Consortium is that customers of Faro, users of Smalltalk, people interested in commercial, people interested in Smalltalk can sponsor the organization. They can become a member, a bronze, a silver, a gold member, and they pay so many euros a year. And then the Faro Consortium can use those funds as it sees fit. And then Faro Pro is an organization for providing support to commercial users. And these are very first steps. The problem with Faro Pro is that it really interfaces to commercial organizations in the same way that a commercial vendor does. And there's a potential for a much richer or a much more flexible relationship. I hope I'll manage to outline that as we go on. And the Faro Consortium suffers a serious problem, which is that, well, how do you value the contributions of all of the people who participate in Faro? You know, some of us are not in the Faro community, like I'm only peripherally involved. I haven't been a member, but they use my virtual machine. There are other people who are very central to it. There are people who are receiving state funding, etc. So if you look at it, there's a whole set of different people, but there isn't a consistent flow of money from the sponsors through Faro Pro to all of these kind of interesting activities, and that's a systemic problem. A really interesting systemic problem, which again I mentioned earlier, is this thing of INRIA being able to fund PhDs, and when they get to the end of their PhD, there's nowhere for them to go, and they go to Google. So then we have some problems. But okay, so there are some brightnesses. There's the fact that people like Lam are looking at investing in the Faro community. There's the fact that there are organizations like FAST, which are holding conferences like this, getting things happening. There's a way in which the atmosphere in Buenos Aires is conducive to Smalltalk startups. There seem to be as much, or if not much more, activity here around Smalltalk than there is in Germany and France around the Faro and Squeak communities. So there's reasons to be cheerful. But in terms of the actual mechanics of the economics, I don't think I've seen much in the community itself. But outside of that community, I think we're in a very interesting position of change. Forgive me for being political, but I think, you know, the globe is at a point of obvious crisis: environmental crisis, economic crisis. And one of the obvious keys to that crisis is the failure of classical economics to describe economic activity accurately at all. It's actually a complete falsehood. And there's a very interesting new name, Evonomics, the evolution of economics, and a website with a number of authors writing about it and publicizing through social media on the failure of classical economics and alternative models, things like resource-based economies, where you view an economy's primary function not in monetary terms but in allocating resources, etc. And there's some really interesting critiques, and I encourage as many of you who are interested to go and have a look at some of these articles and have a read. So now I'm getting kind of out of my depth, and I'm waffling because I'm not sure I know what I'm talking about here. But one of the things that I did notice from the Peer-to-Peer Foundation was 10 ways to energize open source communities. And so one of them, have your business model open so people know what you're doing, making sure that the information is open so that you can share. That's shared knowledge is key to open source communities. practice open cooperativism. I don't know why that's different to cooperations. Just be open and cooperate. And one that I'll come back to that I think is the really interesting idea here is open value or contributory accounting. And then, okay, we want to distribute the benefits and share the IP by having appropriate licenses so that no one person can dominate. And that in the olden days we had unions to protect us, but now we need new forms of protection from the risk of employment. So common fair practices, replacements for older labour protection. That we should base our systems around open and sustainable designs, and to get a feedback going in the economic activity. That we want to coordinate our production together. Cosmo-localization is great. I like those New Zealand mussels, but the thought of those mussels flying on a 747 from New Zealand to my plate in California makes me cringe at the cost. So this is about, the heavy things should be local and the light things should be global. And then, okay, we want to share physical infrastructure, so workspaces, shared office spaces and stuff. Lauren has taken me to WeWork in San Francisco, and it's not just a place where you sit down, it's a community, and it has a social media activity around it, and it's a place where you can rub shoulders and generate an open network, and it's a place where you can post job requirements and job availability. So it's much more than just an office. It's kind of an interesting activity. And so we're mutualizing generative capital. Well, okay, when I produce, and let me go on to this one. So open value or contributory accounting is the notion that if there is a flow of money into a community, then the way back out to the participants has to be, in some sense, fair. If it's equal shares for all, it disrespects the fact that in most open source communities we see a 1/x graph of committers. That there are certain members of the community that are incredibly valuable, that make lots of commits. There's a center of people that are solid members of the community, and then at the end are these people who are just starting to get into the community, or maybe they've retired. Their involvement is small, but their contribution is nonetheless valuable, not least because it's a long tail, and because of course they have different ideas. So one has to have a way of spreading the value in response to that truth that different individuals contribute different amounts. And so open value and contributory accounting is this idea that possibly in a community we can evaluate each other, we can give each other karma points, so we collectively decide how much our contributions are worth. So it's not based on some authority, it's a consensual arrangement. And then when the funds do come into the community, they could be spread according to that evaluation. And when I mentioned those ideas, everybody's like, not everybody, but people much less naive than me were like, you could game that system, man, that's ridiculous. Me and my friends, we can get together and artificially inflate our value, and people are bitchy, people have personal disagreements and they vote people down on non-objective measures, etc. So, there's a way in which these principles or these practices actually are kind of motherhood and apple pie. They sound good, but they don't really work in practice. And they're an example of the tragedy of the commons. So the tragedy of the commons is a phrase that describes the problems to do with shared resources. It comes from an article written in 1833 by William Forster Lloyd, and he used as his example a pasture, some grassland which is shared by a set of farmers, and if the farmers share the pasture equally, the community benefits. But if one farmer goes in and decides to, feed his cows in the middle of the night, he can actually steal more of the resources, feed his cows better, and the community as a whole suffers, but the individual benefits. So the tragedy is that there is an incentive for somebody to break, to act unfairly, which is exactly our problem. Well, okay, so one of the things that we're faced with when we look at the world is that there are successful collective species. There are ants. There are very, very carefully balanced ecosystems where there's actually a dynamic equilibrium between carnivores and their prey. And for a long time, the teaching of Darwinian evolution has focused on individual selection, and that's reflected itself politically in neoliberalism. The famous statement by Margaret Thatcher that there is no such thing as a society. But in our mathematical sophistication and our ecological sophistication, people are finally starting to articulate formally how it is that group selection can happen, and how it is that actually a collective can be optimized. And there are really interesting examples in human society. So there's one I found out last night, so I have nothing to say about it, and I hope that somebody here will know about it. But acequia is a name for water rights in the Spanish language. The Moors brought the system to Spain from Arabia. And then it came to the Andes and has been used in communities here for hundreds of years now. The one I do know about much more that I will talk to a little bit is subak, which was developed in the 9th century in Bali in Indonesia, and it's a system which allows communities who are basically farming on hillsides with paddy fields to distribute the water evenly. So the problem is, you get somebody at the top of the hill, if they're near the source, they can strangle everybody's access to the water further down. And if you look at the relationship between the US and Mexico, the US has dried out the Colorado River, and Baja is suffering, and that's an example of an asymmetric set of an asymmetric relationship in which the states mistreats the Mexicans, and Mexico suffers. But this thing has been in operation since the 9th century and solves that problem amongst indigenous farmers. And there are 1,200 such water distribution channels, and each serves between 50 and 400 farmers. So that's between 60,000 and 480,000 human beings that depend on this collective system for their well-being. Well, these kind of systems were studied by economist Elinor Ostrom, who died very few years ago, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2009 for her analysis of these kinds of systems. And she extracted 8 principles for managing a commons. And it's nice to feel the resonance with Ralph's talk. So these are lovely principles, clearly defined boundaries. You have to know that you're a member of the group. And the group has to have an identity, has to know what its purpose is. So we feel membership, and we can distinguish between our group and other groups, and we can feel a collective identity and be clear as to our membership. The proportional equivalence between benefits and costs is that old saw, which goes back to, I first heard about this in connection with Adam Smith's economics in the right-wing political environment in the 80s in Britain, where Adam Smith was held up as a backer of small businesses, when in fact part of Adam Smith's thought was, if you don't have big businesses, if you have small businesses, then the damage that you do to the environment is local. So you're not going to shit in your own backyard, and you're going to behave well. When you get big organizations, you can have this asymmetry between benefits and costs. You can keep the benefits for yourself, and you can externalize the costs. You can, try and get funding through taxes, or you can ship your waste to Nigeria, whatever. So, in fact, Adam Smith's ideas about small businesses are to do with the need to keep activity local, so that you cannot externalize your costs and reap the benefits. And so, in any management of the commons, there has to be a fair equivalence between the benefits and the costs, so that we all share the benefits and we all share the costs. Any agent in the system that's able to game it, it's going to break. So then there have to be collective choice arrangements. The community needs to be a democratic institution. It needs to make its own decisions. It needs to decide what activities it's going to have. Now, that can, of course, involve, okay, we should respond to a particular customer because they're interesting, but it's a decision that the community should make collectively. And I broke that in being very partial in the work that I was paying earlier. Now, for any of this to work, there has to be effective monitoring. The system must be observable. We must be able to look at it and see what's going on, because if you can hide your activities, again, that will break down. Graduated sanctions means that when people start to encroach or start to break the rules, work against the rules, you don't want to cut off somebody's hand just because they've done something wrong. They may have done something wrong because they're in a learning experience. So sanctions must climb with the severity of the offense. And at the same time, if you have inadequate sanctions, as we have against many companies, right, you cannot actually do anything against the company because it's too strong and the sanction is too weak to change its behavior. So sanctions must climb, and they must climb to a sufficient level. Now, another thing that must happen is that we must have fair and fast conflict resolution. It's no good if it's unfair. If you have to go to the courts, it's unfair because you need a lot of money, right, so that the poor can't use the court system. And the other thing is that you need time, because things take an awful long time to go through the courts. So the community has to develop a fast and fair means of resolving conflicts. And it has to be fairness in some way is equivalent to cheap, or at least affordable. It has to be generally accessible. And then, of course, the last two are kind of related to the first one, local autonomy. The community, if it's a rich community, will have lots of different activities in it, sub-activities. And for the community to be vibrant and rich, it must be that different parts of the community can do different things and have autonomy. And then this community fits in a broader ecosystem where it has a connection with many other interesting activities, other organizations, and if this kind of economy takes off, there will be more and more of these kind of collectives with which one will want to interact. So there has to be a set of mechanisms for governance which scale from this small, locally autonomous thing to the broader ecosystem of systems, and manage to have these new organizations interact in interesting ways. So these ideas live at least in one place, which is on thecommons.org. And I encourage you to go and look there. But that's as far as my understanding has got so far. And so I'd like to open it up to the audience and hear your thoughts in response to these ideas. Thank you. And maybe we can just talk loudly rather than use microphones, because the conversation might be more fluid.
Hi. So, you made a point a couple times that people to get the system how in behavior and so on. And so self-mentioning is a problem. I just want to point out what we don't need to revoke, not necessarily to revoke your behavior, to suspect that self-measurement or self-qualification might not work, because everybody knows that everybody is about average drive. So the illusion of superiority is something to consider. Next.
Eliot, in the stew bag, the water distribution, water rights, doesn't actually provide a competitive advantage to the individuals because they can enable competitive advantage to some other means.
Right, it's more an ecological. It's an ecological maintenance system, but interestingly, it's old. It observes these principles. It's been durable, and
right. My point is, so how do you apply that to something where you have asynchronous competitive advantage, right? It's not an equal resource. If it's an equal resource, like the water rights, then certainly you can do it, but if it's not...
Right, and I think that's a very important point. I mean, I said at the beginning, that this 1 over X committing thing, means that I think people who provide work in the community are working at very different rates. And then there are also, something that I meant to say earlier, different distances of the workers from the source of funding, right? So some people are working on e-toys and physical robots, and that's incredibly valuable, but it produces expert programmers in 15 years' time, right? And so a Google or an eBay, a big programming shop may fund that because they're thinking on that timescale, but an industrial user of Smalltalk may think, no, I want good Smalltalk programmers right now. I'm not interested in funding that, right? So that's still a valuable activity, but the timescale is wrong. And then there's ways in which people who are working, the closer you are to the customer, the easier it is to get the contract, to get the money to flow. So if you're an assembler at the application level and you're not an infrastructure provider, you have easier access, right? But again, there's being in the right niche. So what if somebody, just to the side is doing something useful? So I think that's one set of problems, and then the fact that that there's the possibility of generating great wealth if you're in the right business means that you might not want to be a member of the community. But if you are a member of the community, I think there's very interesting things that happen. We were discussing yesterday how would you approach the kind of map-reduce massive cloud computing with Smalltalk. One of the things that you need is really good statistics packages. We have all of the distributed programming infrastructure in various prototype forms, and we can put together distributed map-reduce. But you really need something like an R scripting language, etc. Okay, so how does the community energize itself to produce such a framework? Well, there are people in the community who've in the commercial community who've written such, and it may be for them that it makes sense for them to open source if they can control their IP, right? Because the statistics part of it is common knowledge. The implementation is valuable, but if they share the implementation, then they share the maintenance costs, and maybe they share benefits, so there can be incentives for them. And so one of the ways in which this asymmetric value or asymmetric profit generation can function is in recognizing that participation in the open source community doesn't mean that that's your only economic activity. Right, and that you can be in two camps at the same time, and that's what we see with the startups who are doing commercial stuff, and see value in giving funds to the community. So I think that's okay. It's great for people to go off and have a success. I think what I'm thinking about here is how the community, given that broader ecosystem, which is fantastic, how it functions. Because there's things that right now the open source community Whereas, okay, we have a really good programming environment. There's stuff like the Glamour Toolkit and Rossal and stuff. Even though the funding is kind of really patchy, there's some state funding, there's some customers who give money, there's lots of who don't. So that's kind of okay. But there's other things that are not working at all. Like we don't spend much money on marketing. It would be great if the community could say, okay, we get X dollars a year, we're going to spend 0.2x on education, 0.1x on marketing, 0.1x on books, whatever, and 0.6 for our daily bread. So the community, by having an economic organization, can then spread these funds and can employ people to do things other than just the programming.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
I suppose it was a really interesting talk. I'm sorry if I'm going to ask you anything that you haven't read because I have quite a way to hear you. So I was interested in particularly three things. Two of them which are more of the practical domain and one which is more philosophical. I want to ask you in terms of practicality about what you think about
that I can bring these ideas here. They're very new, they're very raw. It's half baked on my part, and I'm ignorant of that. So, I want to answer that question with us. Okay? So.
And I also wanted to ask you, now comes the philosophical part, what is your opinion on the relationship between these principles and the understanding of humans being in inherently good or bad? Because these principles look very nice from the perspective that they talk about sanctions, meaning that one could do not respect the boundaries defined for its own benefit or for the benefit of somebody else.
If you look at them, most of them are actually to do with the possibility of bad actors. So monitoring is about being able to see bad actors. Graduating sanctions is about being able to deal with bad actors. Fast and fair conflict resolution is about conflict, etc. Well, not most, but a lot. So absolutely, human beings are selfish actors, but when we look at our activities, we see lots of cases where that selfish activity is balanced. It has to be balanced. Darwin extinguishes activities that are not balanced. So, absolutely, this seems much more real than the previous 10 principles, or the previous 10 practices, in part because they're from observations of archaic systems that have survived the test of evolution and function, in part because they seem more hard-headed in that sense. So, I think that this is not about a naive approach to human nature, but quite a realistic one. But there's a huge step from these principles, which are descriptive of systems, to the design which satisfies them.
Thank you. And then next.
So, I think allocation of money within a community is one of the real difficult things, right? That's what a lot of this goes on, right? And
you and I have been lucky enough.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. But in general, I'm coming to the conclusion of something along the lines of a living wage, where if you're alive, you're allowed a certain amount of money, and go do whatever you want to do, because I think to a certain extent, are there jobs that nobody wants to do, and the answer is yes, and maybe they should be paid more for doing the jobs that no one wants to do, rather than people that are in lucrative positions to say, hey, I just discovered this pool of oil, it's mine, and I get to reap the riches for years and many generations, all right? So the living wage is the way I would think for a community. You would just share. You remember the community, you get a cut. If, as a community, if we are successful, then the cut is larger. And if we're not, it isn't, all right? And, and we apply these kind of monitoring, et cetera, as being whether you are a member or not your contribution to the community. So I'm with you here, But the thing is, I think it's very, very difficult to measure, okay? And there's a story that I had to go through my mind for, this has been years and years and years, all right? And where the cavemen, early cavemen wandering around, all right? This would be they didn't have caves back then, they would just wander around. And there was one guy that would grab a stick, okay? Every time they stopped the camp, they started scratching in the dirt. And then he'd scratch for a week, and then they'd move on to their next camp, right? Well, eventually they stayed in camps long enough to where he was actually digging a foundation for a house. He was a house builder. They just didn't need house builders early on, but he was practicing his art, learning his craft over generations. And I think that is, I think, to a certain extent, I love, when people ask me what I'm going to do every night, I go, I'll do nothing different. I'll do nothing different. I love what I'm doing. And people do things that they love to do. And, and people that don't love to do something that's useful for other people, well, they deserve to do that. And so anyway, that's why, I think that's a direction that feels better than trying to allocate money, according to contribution. I think everyone has a valuable contribution to make, whether or not it's obvious.
So if we have a look at a state actor, but if we have a look at a state actor, the state has interest in avoiding civil strife, and so the fair wage for everybody makes sense for all participants in the state. Everybody benefits from that. Within our context, we have an example of wanting to do things that people may not want to do, like write books.
There are people that like to write books.
Well, okay, but what about work on the SQL connect? You can imagine, right, that there are jobs we may want to have
writing
that
tests.
freedom.
Writing tests is worth more than writing the brilliant code that makes the test necessary. Right. So I think, those kinds of things are, maybe that's if you haven't made that commit to the main line, then this on tests are your entree to the community. So this is, like I say, it's ripping, but I really, trying to allocate, and measure contributions is very dicey business. Like I said, the worst jobs should pay the most, okay? And, if nobody wants to do it, that's now true economics. How badly do you want money?
Right, but in our community, what we've done is transform the problem from evaluating people's contributions to evaluating who's got a shittiest job.
Yeah.
And those are analogous and equally difficult. So you have to move
well, presumably there's a much more obvious demarcation between the truly shitty jobs.
Actually start learning about how difficult it is to maintain costs.
Well, and the parts that are great, they're great, and they're no different. I mean, there's got to be, to me, shitty job is, okay, there's a very obvious line. People are not in line to do this. You really, literally, like Abby, you know how that goes, right? Getting people to help in a conference, you have to just grab them and drag them and, coerce them and get them into the work. And that's an obvious, anyway, like I say, I was ripping and I think it's so hard to measure good contributions. And it's fun. I mean, to me, life is happy when you're doing the good things. And, okay, you pay me money to do the things I don't want to do. There's more there, overall.
You are suggesting an economic organization for the small community to share profits in a fair way, And so far, the focus has been on that.
That's not really the motivation. The motivation is to have the community more active than it is at the moment.
Of course, that's right.
And so sharing the profits is a means to an end.
Of course, indeed. Totally agree. But what leads me to question is if we are going to compensate fairly people for the stuff we do, a lot of people will start getting a compensation of some sort. People who are doing what they do today for free. That also brings a problem. And the most obvious one is that we will need a serious amount of money to do that. So, a serious amount of money. So that's the most obvious problem. How to get enough money to make it work and not be just peanuts. Okay?
So I don't think that's true. If you look at the activity right now, that's sustained by a certain amount of money, X. If we can increase that to 1.2x, right, that's right. And you see what a difference that makes? Right now, we have a set of activities. And they're partially complete. Some of them are very, very impressive. And so it's not that we suddenly have to turn on this huge figure. And I've already showed you that, in fact, through existing institutions, there is money flowing from commercial users and state actors. What we have now is a distribution problem.
But it would be very hard to get anyone to give up some of the money they are making right now. The way to make the distribution rather should be through new money, I think.
I agree. My own view is that my own income will increase more effective in communities. So one of the things that happens is if the community gets to the critical mass where we can produce a continuous cloud with debuggability, with massive data, nobody else can do on the planet, there will be huge amounts of money going into the community. How do I get to there? Exactly. So I see, this spreading, we doing whatever I can to spread the funds, but everybody there's a huge possible upside. Right? So I think we'll all recognize the possibility that we can make a very healthy business if we can make this work.
Yes, I'm interested in your clearly defined boundaries. What are your, maybe not quite so clearly defined, what are your fuzzy boundaries of the community? What were you thinking of as part of the community?
Well, that's a good question. Right now, I can see a big difference between commercial users like JP Morgan and Lamb that make partial use of open source or just dipping their fingers in open source or no use of open source. People in academia, especially in Buenos Aires, who are working as academics, teachers, and are in startups. People who are using e-toys as maybe just a peripheral part of their activity. I'm sure we can look at it and you can see that almost every book has a about it. I'm a father, so it's not something I spend my whole time doing. And I have other interests. We're all like that. So I think if you look at any individual member, you see that they have a boundary and that you might be able to capitalize them. But other than that, I haven't thought about it along enough. It's an interesting question. When you ask that question, what are the systemics that lead to the question? What are the issues that you see coming from the question?
Yes, we've been talking a bit about this before, so I think
much already. But I believe there's one sustainable way to get money to the people with small code, and is get them small code. So one good way to make more money flowing to the community is to generate more small jobs. That's people getting money, and that's the community. It's people in the community getting money. The money doesn't really flow in what today might seem artificial channels. Regular jobs are one way to get money to the people, right? But there are not so many small jobs. That's one problem. I think the government, all the world contribute to that. And I also think, and this came out in the discussion yesterday, because you were saying, there are companies actually using small code, and parts of small code coming out of the open source community, and there are companies that are waiting expectantly for a benefit and improve something, and whatever other things. There are many of those examples. And even some companies are actively investing money in that through whatever, hiring you, or using quiz, for example. I say that. But then it's not so easy to contribute to the community. And then it's not easy. It's not easy. You don't put the money to. That's just impossible. And then it might also happen that one company might not be willing to contribute the whole money for taking the project to the end. So you might need to have them to get together to contribute to the project. And so coming to what I proposed yesterday as a completely, I think, different approach to this. And after we talk about this, I think we might summarize your idea of this. So I think the community could choose a few projects that the community believes are important for companies and propose them on something like Kickstarter, yes, for companies to contribute to that. And of course that requires somebody to manage all this effort, the project management of that, whatever that is in the community. And then I also thought that the community could choose a piggyback project that the community is interested in. Do not advertise on the Kickstarter page, but they know the money will flow through this main project, into this piggyback project. And so ad hoc teams are built temporarily to work on this specific thing that, I don't know, raise some interest, and maybe even through the same means, individuals could also contribute to that through the same thing. Anybody can contribute to that. So people getting jobs, regular jobs, let us say, could contribute and share what they believe before, what they believe in the team, what they believe in the community, whatever.
This gets directly to Ralph's point now, because now something becomes clear. The way in which Linux communities have fractured and have failed to go. We've got lots of distributions. When we hear Gerardo talk about proposing things like Kickstarter, that presupposes the communication amongst the community to decide what are the most important projects and to have that set of priorities.
Appealing to
and that's a potential for conflict, and it's a potential for schism. So one of the things that we have to solve is we will have to address, which may not be a problem, is that we have to cohere, and we have to participate in collective decision making, and even if there are disagreements, to put up with it and say, okay, well, I don't know how ways to do this time. So that's the way in which these boundaries happen. I think that
screen lots of products like who's going to work, right? How to decide that, and then before posting it, you know that you're going to have the people to do it. But then if somebody then found a job or whatever, so there will be conflicts, but I think it's one particular instance of one collaboration being to solve.
Right. It's very interesting to me that we're notoriously able to self-organize. So if you just set principles, and we can look at and we're open to each other, is that sufficient? And then we can look at each other and say, well, that actually violates the principle. We can do something different. Or yes, that's a good observation of principle. And then you might get this bottom-up evolution of the mechanism of just observing.
Hey, sorry. Would you mind, since on your previous answer you talked about coherence, what does coherence look like for you?
What does coherence look like?
Yeah, you speak of coherence, so to clarify that.
Coherence looks like some map of the technological and business space. There are these activities, there are these technologies like the anything in the cloud, like space, like robotics, like drones, like education, etc. And we have a high-level enough description of those different activities so that we can talk about the Gestalt. And we can talk about our priorities within the Gestalt with small enough brain that we can differentiate and that we can usefully address different areas. So it has to be both fine-grained enough to be meaningful and coarse-grained enough to be manageable and to allow the community to cohere around. And then when we have that map, and that map also includes things like what's the flow of money, all of that kind of stuff, then we have a universal discourse in which we can make decisions and we can communicate. So I think that's what it means.
Okay, sorry. We're running out of time, but I know there are more questions, so let's do some democracy or whatever. So who wants to stay and who wants to go to break? Who want to go to break? Yeah. So, nobody wants to break? Okay, so 2 more questions.
Okay, yeah. I like some of these principles. The one thing I noticed is the potential issue with some of these principles when I think about the things you're talking about, which are very interesting. Because I'm also involved with non-profit, with the pattern community. I do it because of passion and I believe in it. And I obviously don't profit, I do it because for other reasons. Maybe I benefit other people for that. And I'm involved with other non-profits as well. But people do that for other reasons. And I think a lot of people that commit in the small talk community, because their love of that and their passion for it. This focuses on some of the problems. And as you pointed out, actually so, you definitely need to take care of that. But one thing this doesn't focus on is the other side of how do we get people involved. And when I think about people with open source, they're trying to build a name, and so that 1 over X comes to life. But that 1 over X usually happens to the early people. It's almost like a pyramid scheme, and if you're a late adopter, even though you have a passion, you can never really get the benefits of it. The other people, even if they're not doing as much, because they're one of the early ones who got the big name behind them or whatever, they obviously get the benefits of it. But this seems to be one of the problems with some of these types of things overall. Just like when I was a real young guy, things like communes and things like that all seem really good, and occasionally in limited areas it works. But, how can you try to do some of these things, on a big scale? And it seems like this needs, as you're thinking about it, how do we focus on that other positive side as well? Yes, we need to limit people if there's problems and take conflict resolution is important, but how do we also do sharing or to get people excited to bring more money and then the new people coming in, even though they're late adopters, that 1 over X doesn't happen, and I'm the 1 over X. I'd
rather than the actual requirement, you know, from that perspective.
So I have two responses to that immediately. I've not considered the question because it's a very, very interesting question. One is that, the Smalltalk community has a unique advantage, which is that it is technology that grew out of a deep humanistic desire to make the human experience better. And, I come from a very socialist background. When I saw technology, my intelligence and my politics were completely seduced, and I wanted in. This was fascinating, beautiful, challenging, at the same time it was humane. So I see that reflected every time I go to a Smalltalk conference and friends in the Smalltalk community, the passion for the Smalltalk community. I see that value, that set of values reflected in people's desires. It's not the whole thing, but it's an important thing, and that's glue, which allows us to cohere better than some other communities. And it's also a context in which I found my personal experience has been one of being able to learn and master. And I now have colleagues who have learned and have attained mastery. And so I work with clients who's 30 years younger than me, and someone's better than me, and it's quite clear it goes. And I have the joy of working with him and seeing all these new ideas coming. One of the things that I wanted to say earlier is that our work in the lab, Laura and I, ported a sort of Smalltalk communication plan that we put in the thesis. It's the most horrible code. It's like one huge 70-line method with 3 nested exception handlers, and they're logging in there, and we wrote it according to new principles, and it's beautiful. There's so much learning that's happened in 30 years. So there's a way in which the community does get better, and youth does bring new ideas, and it's not the old guys who got at the start who are good. They actually have some old ideas, and they better, try harder. So that's one thing. That's rewarded. Right. No. So the other thing, the other thing is that how do you encourage people to join this community? So once they're in this community, they have a great time. And there's this way in which Smalltalk is so heretical, so unusual, that the people that come into the community tend to be open-minded and strong intellectually. They make their own decisions. And that also produces effect in the community. But if we are economically functional, if we can build a system where you can see that by joining this community, you can feed your family and have a great time, which open source community are you going to join? Right. So, there's a way in which the better that we do that, that will solve that problem.
And that's part of the challenge. And so that's the part that more this effort gives you, you really kind of add from that. And that's what this seems to be lacking. So you won't try to go now.
Well, Eliot, I'd submit that it doesn't take any money to figure this part out, and it's better to figure out when there's no money than to figure out if there is any money.
Absolutely. Yeah, just provide the goals over.
Yeah, exactly. And the other part of it that I think is a real challenge for Smalltalk, but it's a real challenge for any technology, which is money is close to customers, and technology is far away from customers. And so identifying why customers, whoever they are, whatever they are, care about what our technology is a huge challenge for us. We don't have a good way to explain.
So can I give you an instance of that, because it's close to my heart.
They're going to spend money.
Yeah. I want to give you an instance of this because it's very close to my heart. Okay. So technically, people are doing big data, natural language processing for risk, financial risk, etc. And they're doing it in typically Scala frameworks built on top of Java VMs. And they suffer from the Java exception model in production, which is you get retry semantics. So when the exception happens, you have no idea what the error was. You only get the exception and the total. Right? So these guys can't debug. And I was in San Francisco having some sushi at lunch, and I heard two guys talking, and it was like one guy was trying to encourage the other to leave his company and join a new company. And I was saying, I'm using the Spark framework, it's a pain in the ass to debug. You know, like I said, hey, sorry, my virtual conversation. And I said, so small talk, we can solve these problems, right? We have resume semantics, retry. We have resume semantics, we have exception handlers, right? We can do the distribution, we can conceivably stop thousands of calls, allow the program to interact with one, distribute restart it, right? The guy said, well, yeah, what about library logging? We use ancillary Java libraries. If you can provide a JVM compatible solution, we buy it from you tomorrow, right? So this whole idea of doing continual cloud came from conversations with Avi Ryan 3 to 4 years ago when he was setting up Stripe. And what they're doing with Stripe is instant merchant accounts. So when you're doing your Apple iPhone app and you want to be able to do credit card interact transactions with one click. So the problem with Stripe is you can gain that, right? You can just flood them with fake credit card transactions, right? And so Stripe's problem is that they have 2 days between the granting of the account and the payment of the first set of invoices to distinguish the valid credit card transactions from the invalid, and then machine for that. And so Avi said to me, you know, because he'd come to Twitter regularly using Scala, and he developed some of those frameworks. I want to do it in small talk. And I thought, shit, I'm only 4 years away from being able to deliver that. That's too late. Damn. And so, you know, he's gone on. So, you know, Avi and Stripe was one of the founders who came from a Scoop background, and they know the technology, and they can successfully in business. So they would be our ideal participants, but we missed that boat. Now, the table that I joined demonstrates the other. They're a Java shop. They're always going to be a Java shop. You're not going to sell it in small talk. You're blowing smoke. Implement this in Java. So, okay, my idea is that we use the kind of work that accepts that Jan Rang's of building a small talk VM that can run Java like code, and you know, can the community afford to maintain that, right? But maybe there's another thing, which is to market, to find another instance of Stripe, another Avi, that you know, those people may have the faith in small talk and the knowledge, and they may have the application area, and you work with them and you try and build it. But absolutely, it's a really interesting problem. Because you know, the other side, forget the tons of money. I mean, that's the most fun to do. With whole product right now. If you could do that, that's hard stuff, right? Oh, I've got to do that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eliot. Let's try to do a short break, okay? 15 minutes.